So our first step in tying all this together is we have to create an item flow on our IBD. So this is our natural gas grill IBD, and we're going to go ahead and create an item flow. And it's going to start at the natural gas port on the gas line, and it's going to terminate on the natural gas valves, natural gas port in. So notice we now have this item flow here that isn't doing much of anything. It's not conveying anything. We've just defined the item flow. So the next step in this is to go to our conveyed, and we're going to drag on natural gas. And so natural gas is what's being conveyed on the item flow. And so now if we look at this, it tells us that it's conveying natural gas. So our next step in all this is when we have this all set, you'll see that we have realizing messages, connectors, and activity edges. So now that we've created the item flow, we want to associate these two connectors with it. So we go ahead and press Alt-B, which selects those two in the containment tree. We can open the spec window up, and we're going to drag these two onto the realizing connector property. So note that both of them appear here. And these are now set up as the connectors that realize it. Notice the arrows are going backwards. So we're going to fix that right now. We're going to come in here to the symbol properties, and we are going to turn off the conveyed information for A and B. And notice that gets rid of that, which, again, we'll deal with this more perfectly later, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to set that as the default, and we're going to go ahead and apply that as the default style. And so that gets rid of that error. Now the next step in this, if you notice under realizing, is that we have a realizing activity edge, which is the activity diagram expression of that. This is an object flow between the gas line and the gas valve. And so we'll go ahead to our activity diagram for natural gas cooking food. And we can see that the gas line to gas valve is this activity edge right here, this object flow. And so we're going to select that in the containment tree. And again, open up the specification window, and we're going to drag this object flow onto that. So now we know which activity diagram object flow, one-to-many, is associated with this particular item flow. And now we just need the realizing message. And so we can go to our sequence diagram and do the exact same thing. So we have now associated all of our behavioral elements. So we now have realized that as a realizing message. So this now gives us the ability to have a table that displays all of this information. So now if we go to the item flow table, I can now turn on conveyed to see that we're conveying natural gas. And this could be more than one signal if we so chose. We can now go to the target and source of this. So we now have those ports. And we can now turn on the realizing message, connector, and activity edge. And so now we can easily see which of these messages, connectors, and activities are associated with this item flow. And to make this diagram look cleaner now, we can go ahead and delete this off of here. We're not going to delete it from the model. So now this IBD is clean, and we have a table that shows us what's flowing over that item flow, those interfaces. And again, now that these relationships are established, we can use meta chains to do an awful lot of checking to make sure that, for example, that this message is flowing over ports that can legally convey the information, that these connectors obviously can convey it, that the activity edge is set up to be connecting functions owned by these the block that owns these ports. Again, we can do a lot of things with internal consistency and quality checks now that we've associated this. Notice the important thing here is that this allows us to connect deeply nested ports directly and then tie all the connectors in between together. So that solves the problem of connecting deeply nested ports with a single unified connection that we can then use for metrics.